Good morning. Welcome to The Human Author. My name is Jen Cantwell, and today I'm working on the fifth book in my Light Chaser series, The Warning. If you'd like to find out more about the series and get caught up, you should go to jbcantwell.com and read some of the information there. A reminder that at the beginning of every session, I read what I did the day before, so you can always just show up for the first 10 minutes to keep caught up with the story. Something to note, I'm not super happy with yesterday, and I feel like there is a big, huge gap between those scenes and where I'm going to be starting today. So, somewhere in there, there's going to be a big addition to what I've already written because, boy, they are sleeping a lot. They can only sleep so much. So, anyways, without further ado, I'm going to read yesterday's work and then we'll see where I end up. Okay. Immediately, I rushed. He was still down on the floor, perhaps overwhelmed by what he'd just done. A moment later, Kenneth joined me. Hang on just a minute here. I see. I caused a problem yesterday. Okay. I went back too far. Okay. After a while of sitting there, looking up upon the sea, out upon the sea of bodies, I became more nervous, jumpy. The sound of the Wicks had faded away, leaving me to hope that they'd finally abandoned us. Still, it would be stupid to leave. Even I understood this, despite my desire to flee that place and all of the horrors it contained. I would give the others 3 hours to sleep and then would take my turn. In the meantime, after watching so many dead bodies for signs of life, a paranoid thing to do, I finally stood up. I walked over to the guard station, which was right across from the tiny room where my friends slept. I wondered what it must be like to be a guard in this place during such a massacre. Maybe they'd met their final end here as well. I then took to walking among the dead. After a few minutes, I'd made my way, zigzagging through the dungeon. Now that the cries from above had quieted, I felt confident enough to do this. I stopped at one cell, counting the number of bodies inside. Ideally, I wondered if children had been included. Not ideally. I wondered if children had been included. But it didn't take me long to see the answer to that question. At first, I counted the small bodies too, but then I lost track. I wanted to lose track, and I stopped. How had all of this come to be? Who was the madman behind such pain? I thought of Varric, but these bones were old, even older than him. And given the struggle we'd just had up in the throne room, something made me doubt that he would have had enough power to do this on his own. Stringing up a dead rabbit for me to find was one thing. Killing hundreds of people was something else. Gradually, I made my way back to the little room, and I cracked the door open to find my friends resting peacefully. Kenneth, it seemed, had finally given in to his own exhaustion. I would keep my promise, though. For several hours, I sat listening, but the screams of the Wicks did not come again. Finally, when I started yawning too, I opened the door again and shook him by the shoulder. Immediately, he jumped up from the bed, brandishing his giant club, ready to attack. "Whoa, whoa," I said, putting my hands up. "It's just me. You're okay." His eyes were wide, and it took him a few moments to recognize me as one of his cohorts. Finally, he lowered the weapon. "You're ready for anything," I said. "Take a breath." He ignored my comment. "We need to protect ourselves. You of all people must understand that." And of course, I did. Since beginning my journey away from Eagleview so many months before, I had experienced several deadly situations. I'd mostly come through unscathed, or at least helped when injured. And the most powerful thing I'd learned about, even more than a sorcerer trained in the healing arts, was using light. The stuff would float through my system, knitting bones together, fixing stretched muscles, calming me down. I couldn't deny the usefulness of it, but I doubted I would be getting any more anytime soon. I imagined our journey, interrupted now, back to Eagleview. There would be no food between here and there, and I knew it would be a difficult and dangerous way home. I wondered if anything remained in the market back home, not to mention whether or not anyone would be to buy my magic. With Zahn in charge of all things magical, I doubted it. I knew my father had been running out of light on his way home, no longer willing to use it himself. If anything, it could be used to trade. My mouth watered as I imagined good, hearty bread filled with seeds and dried fruit. Grandmother and I only had such things on rare occasions, a celebration, a birthday, perhaps. The truth was, we were lucky to get enough into our bellies on a regular basis. I wasn't sure to save up for such food during those times, but I felt certain now that my father would be close to starvation. With nothing to sell, I couldn't see any other answers. I glanced down at Brennen. Do you feel comfortable with me taking some rest myself? I asked Kenneth. I wasn't sure where his answer was coming from. Maybe it was the fact that he was quickly becoming a man, strong and willing to help protect those he cared about. Or maybe he felt out of control himself. In any case, he gestured toward the bed. Yeah, thanks, I said. I crawled into bed beside Brennen, waking him, but not meaning to. Is it time to go? He asked. He rubbed his eyes sleepily. Not yet, kid, Kenneth said. Give us a few hours, then we can decide what to do next. He nodded at me. I didn't respond, simply lay back onto the hard cot, exhausted. But sleep did not come. Every time I closed my eyes, I was faced with nightmarish visions. None of my memories were good, and my brain played them again and again. Finally, after a couple more hours of this, I rose from the bed. I found Kenneth standing with his club on the other side of the door. When he heard me open it behind him, he turned, ready to strike. You fool, he said angrily. I nearly hit you over the head. I shrugged. What would you have me do? I wanted to be as quiet as possible. He sighed angrily. Still, you should be more careful. I smirked, surprised once again by how much this friend of mine had such a short amount of time. I think I should go up and see what's going on, I said. We've been down here for a while. Maybe they're gone. I doubt it, he said. I haven't seen the Wicks before, but I can tell you that those people Zahn have sent after my group have been thorough in their searches for stragglers. No, we go together or not at all. This irked me, his unwillingness to allow me to help in this way. But I knew he was right. Hadn't I already regretted leaving my friends behind? Back through the door and found Brennen wide awake. What about him? I asked. Wouldn't it be better for one of us to protect him and the other to go up and scout? Brennen jumped up from the bed, making his way to Kenneth and grabbing onto his arm. No way. You're not leaving me behind again. This broke my heart as I imagined what his life had been like before meeting me. I knew that life with the lifters had been terrifying for both him and Regan. Somehow they'd managed to survive, and we'd managed to help them escape the tyranny of that group. I knew they had been abused, but I could only have wished that light was powerful enough to take those experiences away. It wasn't. I knew our only choice was to stick together, and I resolved to not leave him behind again. Kenneth could take care of himself. He'd proven that with his club, but I knew I needed to stop looking at Brennen as a child. It had been his death blow that had taken out Varric after all. The three of us strapped on our traveling packs and made for the exit. I didn't know how long we'd been down there, but upon our arrival at the top of the staircase, the sun was high in the sky. This time, though, the Wicks were actively flying all around the castle, surely searching for us. What do we do? I asked in a whisper. Kenneth reached out for our hands and pulled us back into the stairway. There has to be another way, he said. He was looking down the stairs again, and I wondered if he intended for us to stay in the dungeons longer. But he surprised me. Let's just go down one floor. I saw a passageway on our way up. Maybe it leads somewhere. One thing was clear. We would be in hiding for some time until Torin learned the truth about his last son. I wished I could see the look on his face when he found out, a face I'd never seen before in real life. In a lot of ways, going after someone like Torin was something I was doing blindly. I had experienced so many terrible things that had been commanded by him, but not having ever met the man myself, it was hard for me to focus my energy on hatred toward him. Somehow I would eventually meet. I wondered if my audience with him would be one on one or in battle. The only army I knew he had was of Wicks, and Wicks, while frightening, seemed unable to think for themselves. They'd never actually hurt me before, only transported me to wherever their master commanded. For whatever reason, Torin had never shown his face. Would he now? Would that inevitable battle finally begin? After several minutes of walking through the hallways beneath the castle, we found another stair, this one dimly lit by the opening at the top. We tiptoed upstairs, then stopped, looking out one by one, plotting what to do next. I don't see anyone, I said. Do you think it's safe? Kenneth smiled. Finally, you listen. Part of me wanted to punch him in the arm, but I didn't do it. I didn't expect him to come at me with that club, but the threat was always there. We didn't see anyone in the hallway above, so we climbed out of the stairway and crawled across the floor, hiding beneath one of the many open doors. All was quiet, even us, but we didn't have any time to waste. We were looking for our elusive escape, and I popped my head up over the ledge, trying to get a quick view of the square beyond. Several Wicks were still guarding the castle in the sky above, but at least half of their numbers had disappeared. Perhaps Torin thought that we had as well. I dropped back down. We're not in the clear enough to leave the castle, I said, but the risk has diminished. I think it will take another day or two before they finally fly away. Or until Torin finally comes here himself, Kenneth said. My stomach dropped at this. As much as the past several months had prepared me for our inevitable meeting, I found I wasn't ready to meet him. I wondered if I ever would be. Let's find somewhere else to hide, I said. Come on. I didn't dare stand. Instead, we crawled across the once spectacular floors. I wondered what the images depicted on the stone had once represented. Time and neglect resulted in several cave-ins in the ceiling. Great boulders of stone fallen to the floor, ruining the mosaic. It didn't matter. The days of this kingdom had long since passed. Now, the castle had become little more than a tomb. Dead citizens were scattered everywhere, and the ruined castle stood crumbling above. After several minutes of crawling, we found a group of rooms at the far end of one of the hallways. Once we made it to the doorway that faced the interior of the castle, we leaned back against the walls, heaved. But though the Wicks were now silent, that didn't mean they were gone. As much as the rest of the castle had fallen into disrepair, I was surprised to find these rooms largely untouched. Maybe it meant that Varric had been the one to destroy the palace. If that were true, it meant he'd missed this particular group of rooms. As I peeked around one of the corners, I saw a chamber with a large bed and several chairs positioned in front of a fire still burning in the grate. The curtains were drawn, hiding the room. I stood up carefully and approached the fire, and once I got closer, I recognized it as a magical flame. It answered one of the questions I had. When I'd abandoned my hiding spot when I was traveling with Colm, I'd wondered if the fire I'd left behind would continue to burn indefinitely. Now, looking at these flames and knowing Varric was finally defeated, it seemed I had my answer. I quickly shifted my attention away from the memory of what had happened with Colm, what I had done to him. He hadn't deserved it. It's too late. Maybe, but it wasn't too late to change. And though I still craved light, I was feeling more and more confident about my intention to quit that particular habit. It's not enough. I would just have to wait and see if that thought was true. Would it matter if I were to take out the most evil sorcerer in our world? Would it make up for what I'd done? No. No, it wouldn't. And even if I were to get away with it, even if my lies were accepted, in the end I would always know the truth. We all entered the room, and Brennen crawled into the bed, bashing his head against an ancient pillow. Kenneth headed straight to the window, pulling the curtain back an inch so he could see what was going on outside. "They're gone," he said, and I joined him at the ledge. "Gone? See for yourself," he said, and beckoned me forward. So like I said, they're sleeping a lot, and they're about to sleep some more, but it'll be fixed in the edit. So I'm going to go ahead and get to and take a look at this outline and figure out where to start. Okay. Open quote. Oh. Open quote. "Do you think it's safe to leave yet? Question mark. Close quote, I asked. Period. New line. Open quote. "No way, comma, close quote." Brennen's voice came from the bed. Period. Open quote. "I'm not going out there. Period. Close quote. New line. Kenneth agreed. Period. Open quote. "I don't think it's time yet. Comma, close quote," he said. Period. Open quote. "It's only been hours since they left, comma, and they might be hiding somewhere. Period. If they are, comma, we'll be dead before the day is through. Period." Wheel. Close quote. New line. I sat down on the floor. Undo. I sat down on the edge of the bed, comma, looking around the opulent room. Period. Had this been the place where Varick had spent his nights? Question mark. That fire made me think that yes, comma, it had been. Period. Still, comma, the bed was tightly made, comma. Brennen finally pulling back the covers and diving inside. Period. New line. I looked down at my boots, comma, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd had them off. Period. New line. Open quote. So they're gone, comma, right? Question mark. Close quote, I asked. Period. New line. Kenneth nodded. Period. Open quote. For now. Period. Close quote. New line. I reached down and pulled my boots off, comma. Then, comma, undo. Then dove beneath the covers, comma, myself, period. New line. I had never experienced the feeling of a fine bed, comma, not even in the cap-veiled Cap Kingdom, period. My bare feet pushed down the bedding, comma, and I found myself collapsing against the pillows beside Brennen, period. New line. I yawned loudly, period. New line. Open quote. Have you slept at all? Question mark, close quote, Kenneth asked, period. New line. Had I? Question mark. There had been stretches of time, comma, black in my mind, comma, but I couldn't remember the feeling of waking up, period. New line. Open quote. I don't know, comma, close quote, I said, period, open quote. I don't think so, period, close quote, new line. Open quote. You need to rest, comma, close quote, he said, period. Noon. I looked over and found Brennen's eyes already closing. Period. Finally, I consented to join him and pulled the covers all the way up to my chin. Period. The mattress might have been centuries old, but it was more comfortable than anything I'd ever experienced. Period. Finally, I let my eyes undo. I let my eyes close as well, and it was only moments before sleep took me. Period. New line. Suddenly, I heard screaming, and my eyes flew open. Period. I jumped out of the bed, only to find that night had fallen. Period. I rushed up to the window where Kenneth watched. Period. New line. Open quote. I walked up behind him and pulled on his shoulders until he was sitting on the floor, away from the window. Period. New line. Open quote. You need to hide! Exclamation point. Close quote. I said. Period. Open quote. Don't you hear that? Question mark. Close quote. New line. He looked at me strangely, his face lit by the blue flame in the grate. Period. Great. Open quote. I don't hear anything, close quote, he said. Period. New line. I stopped, listening again, but I soon found that it was, in fact, silent. Period. New line. What had I heard? Question mark. New line. Open quote. You were talking in your sleep, close quote, Kenneth said. Period. Open. Did you hear something? Question mark. Close quote. New line. I didn't answer him, simply putting my head into my hands and shaking it back and forth. Period. I was suddenly aware of my lack of footwear, undo. Of the fact my boots were still scattered on the floor. Period. Immediately, for them, stuffing them onto my feet, ready to run. Period. New line. Open quote. I heard screaming, close quote, I said. Period. Open quote. I don't think I was dreaming. Period. I think it was real. Period. Close quote. New line. Kenneth looked out the window, his face doubtful. Period. Open quote. I haven't seen or heard a thing for hours. Period. You must have been dreaming. Period. Come over, sit down. Period. Close quote. New line. As the hours had passed, Kenneth had set himself up on the sofa beneath the window. Period. There was just enough room for two, and I sat down. Period. Undo, not sure if I was ready to believe him. Period. New line. Was my magic enough to hear things other people couldn't? Mark. Was. tried to think back to all of the times I'd met Torin in my dreams, period. This time, comma, I hadn't seen his face at all, comma, just blackness. Undo. Just darkness, period. Comma. And the screams, comma, well, comma, they'd propelled me into a panic, period. New line. I glanced out the window, comma, pulling the curtain back a couple of inches, period. But I soon found that Kenneth was right, semicolon. Wink, undo. The Wicks were gone, period. New line. Open quote. What does it mean? Question mark, close quote, Kenneth asked, period. Open quote. Is it a game? Question mark, close quote, new line. I shrugged, comma. Undo. Didn't know how to answer these questions, period. It certainly seemed that everything was a game to Torin, period. It was the only explanation for the fact that I hadn't seen him yet, period. New line. Open quote. I don't know, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. But it's for us to leave, period. Close quote. New line. Open quote. I think it's safe now for us to relax, period. Comma, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. Let's wait for the moon to set and then be on our way, period. Close quote, new line. I shook my head, period. Open quote. It's too soon, period. I don't trust it, period. It's quiet now, comma. But they could easily be hiding, period. Close quote, new line. Open quote. We can't stay here forever, comma, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. Stay here with me, period. You'll be okay, period. Close quote, new line. At first, I resisted, comma. But when he took my hand and pulled me down, comma, I finally sat, period. New line, open quote. I'm surprised by you, comma, close quote. He said, period. New line. What do you mean? Question mark, close quote. New line, open quote. I guess I always thought you were fearless back in the market, period. Weren't you? Question mark, close quote, new line. How false this was, period. How might I have explained it? Question mark, new line. Open quote. No, comma, close quote, I said, period, open quote. Not fierce, period. Were you? Question mark, close quote, new line. He scoffed, period, open quote. No, comma, never, period. My father made me guard the stand at night, starting when I was 10, period. He left me out there every night, comma, every night until I finally left home, period. And I was scared every night, comma, too, period. I had to learn to deal with my fear, period, close quote, new line. I recognize this as true for myself as well, period. New line, open quote. I don't think there's anywhere safe in Eagle View, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. I think everyone is afraid there, comma, not just us, period, close quote. New line. This conversation made me think of Oriana, comma, of my failure to save her amidst the fear of her family, period. I wondered how things might have been different if they'd ever been willing to allow me to help, period. Perhaps there would have been a way then, period. But they'd had little money despite their stature, comma, and they weren't willing to take any chances with my magic or anyone else's, period. New line. An image of her flashed before me, comma, her lips bloodied from her cough, comma, the look of fear in her eyes, period, as she struggled for breath. New line. It made me hate them, comma, semicolon. Not only her family, comma, but the lawmen as well, period. New line. I wondered who was controlling Zahn, period. Before Aaron had turned, comma, she indicated that he was working on his own, period. I thought about the pool of cap light in the tower, comma, and I wondered how often he drank from it, period. New line. I would drink it dry, period. New line. Despite my best intentions, comma, I knew this was true, period. I wondered if there was any left, period. New line. Open quote. I think I should go look for food, comma, close quote, Kenneth said, period. He glanced at Brennen, period. Open quote. Can you keep an eye on him? Question mark, close quote. I promise I won't be long, period, close quote. New line. Open quote. No way, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. You're not leaving us, period, close quote. New line, open quote. If we don't find something to bring with us, comma, we'll starve before we ever make it to Eagle View, period. We flew for an hour, comma, semicolon. We don't know how many days away we are, period. Close quote, new line. Let me go, and I promise I'll come back if I run into any trouble, period, close quote. He tapped his club against his boot, period. New line, open quote. You're a fool for going by yourself, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. After all the guilt you've made me shoulder, how can you, M dash, question mark, close quote. New line. Period. New line. Open quote. I can do it if you can, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. I'll be more careful, period, close quote, new line. I looked over at Brennen, and I had to admit that the prospect of staying in that room was appealing, period. Perhaps we could just stay here until the end, period. Would it matter if we never made our way home, question mark. New line. You'll starve here, period, new line. Probably, period. But maybe it was time to get it over with, semicolon. Maybe it was time to wait for Torin to come for me instead of running, period. New line. Open quote. Maybe we shouldn't go, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. Maybe we should just stay here and wait for him to file, period, close quote. New line. Brennen, undo. Kenneth shook his head, period, open quote. We need to go back, period. You know that, period. You giving up your life to save everyone else isn't going to work, period. The people in your life who care about you won't, period. Myself included, period. Close quote. New line. Now let me go, period. Close quote. New line. New line. I crossed my arms, period, open quote. Fine, period. I'll give you 1 hour, period. But if you take any longer than that, Brennen and I will come after you, period, close quote, new line. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off, period. New line. Open quote. Whether I say it or not, we need you and your club, period. It's barbaric, but I can't deny it's been helpful, period, close quote, new line. I was still feeling guilty about the fact that I hadn't been able to take out Varric by myself, period. In fact, comma, it had required brute force, comma, something I wasn't sure my magic could equal, period. The level of hatred on Kenneth's face when he took undo, when he dealt that first blow, was clear and pure, period. It was enough to scare me, comma, maybe even more so than Varric, period. Had. New line. Would we all end up that way? Question mark. New line. Oh. Fine, comma, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. I'll be back in an hour, period. But if you're smart, comma, you'll stay here if I disappear, period. Close quote, new line. I clenched my teeth, comma, unwilling to answer, period. Comma, and watched as he left the room without a backward glance, period. New line. I sat back on the sofa and pulled back the curtain, comma, searching the skies for any threat, period. New line. But Kenneth had been right, period. Colon. It appeared they were gone, period. New line. It's a trick, period. New line. I couldn't tell whether or not to believe this thought, period. Comma. So far, comma, Torin had only sent others to track me down, period. Donovan, comma, Phelan, comma, and now Varric, period. He'd done nothing more. Undo. Torin had done nothing more than try to hurt me again and again, period. And he had succeeded, period. After all, comma, he had been the one to take Quinn and Duna away from us, period. I knew that they would be used in some way against me, comma, perhaps against us all, period, comma, army or no army, comma. I felt that it would come down to just the two of us in the end, period. New line. Maybe I should go, period. Maybe I should have left right then, comma, turning myself over to the Wicks, comma, running toward the inevitable end, period. Would that matter? Question mark. And what if I were to fail? Question mark. What if it turned out the prophecy was wrong? Question mark. I imagined what life might be like for everyone else if Torin proved able to kill me, period. He would take over everywhere, comma, each kingdom, comma, turning them toward undo. Forcing them into a different kind of life, period. I imagined the looks on my father's and grandmother's faces if they were to be forced. Used by Torin, period. Somehow I felt that their lives would be undo, would turn out to be much worse than those of others in Eagleview, period. I couldn't say how, comma, but this thought came through, period. New line. Torin was after me, comma, and yet he had sent other people in his stead, period. It followed that he would use anyone I trusted against me, period. That included Cap father and Cap grandmother, period. Maybe even Regan, period. New line. As I stared out into the night, comma, I saw no one, comma, no Wicks or anyone else in the skies, period. Maybe Kenneth was right. And we should stay, period. Check, period. Maybe Kenneth was right, and we should be on our way sooner than later, period. Either way, comma. We were facing a danger few in our world had ever faced, period. I felt guilty for having allowed Brennen to come along with us, period. But while I considered him to be little more than a kid, comma, he had begun to prove himself to us, comma, and I considered that maybe that wasn't a fair assessment, period. New line. As I waited for Kenneth to reappear, comma, I watched as the moon slowly sank down to the horizon, period. Comma, frequently looking behind me, comma, waiting for him to appear in the doorway, period. New line. He didn't come, period. No one did, period. New line. June, comma. I began to pace the room, period. How long had it been? Question mark. Were the Wicks able to fly inside the castle? Question mark. And if so, comma, was he dead already? Question mark. New line. Fear began to overtake me as I imagined him sprawled upon the mosaic floor, comma, ruining it even further, period. I walked to the door and put my ear up against the wood, period. But I heard nothing, comma, steps, comma, no screaming, comma, not even a creak in the floor, period. Undo. No sign of him at all, period. New line. Finally, comma, as the sun began to rise, comma, he burst through the door, comma, a triumphant look upon his face, period. New line. Open quote. You'll never guess what I found, comma, close quote, he said, comma, smiling widely, period. He had a small bag, comma, and he walked to the bed and dumped out its contents, period. New line, comma, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, period. But as the reality sunk in, comma, I knew I would need to be stronger now than ever before, period. New line. Because in front of me, comma, clinking as they rolled around, comma, were no fewer than 10 vials of cap light, period. New line. My eyes grew wide, comma, and I looked up to him, comma, hoping desperately that he had an answer for me, period. What I needed in that moment was for someone to believe that I could do what I needed to, comma, that I could keep away from this particular period. New line, open quote. Where did you get all that? Question mark, close quote. Brennen said, comma, and I whipped around, comma, having forgotten his presence in the room, period. His eyes, undo. His face was undo. He was surprised, comma, and he crawled down to the base of the bed and made to swipe for one of them, period. New line, open quote. Hey now, comma, close quote, Kenneth said, period. Open quote. We're going to need these if we intend to make it to Eagleview, period. I don't know about you, comma, but I didn't see much in the way of grassland between undo on our way here, period. In fact, comma, it looked pretty desolate, period. This is our ticket, period. Close quote. New line. Deep breath, comma, letting it go, comma, thinking hard, period. What would I do now? Question mark. New line. Kenneth took the vials and put them into the outer pocket of his traveling pack, period. Oops. New line, open quote. We'll save it, comma, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. Hand it over, period, close quote. He held out his hand for Brennen, period. Toward, close quote. Undo. Hand it. New line. Reluctantly, comma, and without taking out the stopper, comma, he handed it over, period. Undo. He passed it back to him, period. He looked miserable, period. New line, open quote. I'm hungry, comma, close quote. He said defensively, period. New line, open quote. Not as hungry as you'll be on our journey, period. Close quote. He stuffed this last vial in beside the others, comma, the glass clinking, period. Open quote. I think this might be enough to get us there, comma, close quote, he said to me, open quote. What do you think? Question mark, close quote, new line. He was asking the wrong person, comma, but how could he know? Question mark. How could he know that at the earliest opportunity, I would try to steal it away? Question mark. New line. He doesn't know, comma, period. And he doesn't need to, period. New line. The lie I had been telling myself for the past several days floated to the top of my consciousness, period. With every day that passed, comma, passed, I was getting farther and farther away from the truth of what had been happening, comma, from the truth of what I'd done, period. I'd been trying to negotiate with myself, comma, convincing myself that I would be okay without cap light, period, new line, but I didn't believe it, period. Not for a moment, period. All right. That's it for today. I got to 2,333 words, so it's not bad. If anybody has questions, feel free to email me, jen@thehumanauthor.com. Remember to check out jbcantwell.com for more information about this series. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Pacific. Have a good one.